Thanks for staying with us on Astro AWANI. I'm Melissa Idris. With me, Professor Jayati Ghosh of Nehru University. Now we're talking about the value of care work. So, Professor, you were in town as well for the launch of Khazanah Research Institute's report on this. Now, talk to me about how you understand the Malaysian context to be when it comes to the public value of care work.
So I'm really proud to actually have been associated even marginally with this report because I think it's excellent. They've done a time use survey in Kuala Lumpur. Obviously it isn't very large because you don't have the resources, but I think this could become an impetus even for the national statistical system to take it up and do a time use survey, which they're going to lobby for. Why is that important? Because it shows that there's so much of unpaid work in care in Malaysia, which is often not recognized at all. And in fact, the extent of it is quite startling. And this is done not just by women who are at home and not doing anything else, but it's done by working women who also have to do extra work back home, the double burden, as it's called. And the importance of this is that if you really want to do anything about it in public policy, you have to first recognize it. Recognize it exists, how much of it there is, how much it contributes. So time use surveys play a very important role in recognizing that the care work that is actually done. Because then you actually know what people are doing, you're able to identify the different blocks and say, well, these are the things we can do something about. Because in fact, when we talk about dealing with care, I basically propose the 5 R's. Recognize, reduce the bits that you can reduce, which are unnecessary and drudgery, and maybe mechanical things can replace it. You know, like grinding spices or things like that.
I see, okay.
Yeah. Washing machines instead of hand washing, you know, things like that. Redistribute, and the redistribution occurs between society, that is the government, private provision, and households. And within households, men and women. Redistribute at all levels, right? The 4th R, reward. Actually pay care workers properly in terms of the actual value they provide to society. Instead of saying, oh, you know, she's just looking after old people and doesn't deserve much. Recognize that this is an immensely important activity which massively increases human welfare. Reward care workers properly. And finally, represent. Allow them a voice in the policy making.
So have you seen good policy come out based on these recommendations?
So they have a number of interesting recommendations. They have recommendations, for example, on the provision of childcare. They did a specific focus on childcare. And they have various ideas about how to improve childcare, how to make it more accessible and affordable for all families as a big part of reducing that care burden. There are various other measures that would be coming out more, especially if we had a national time use survey.
I'm just wondering because, you know, the 5 R's that you mentioned, it feels like it's about a change in the cultural systems, the cultural values, the patriarchy even. Is it something that can be changed through economic policy?
Economic policy can help. And let me put it this way, you know, unfortunately societies don't value things which don't have a high monetary reward. So we will say that a primary school teacher is not really worth as much as this fancy financier, because that one earns more. Whereas in terms of social value, the primary school teacher is much more important. So I think the economic policies can certainly push for a wider recognition.
Is this a conversation that India is also having?
Yes, but we are even much, much worse than Malaysia. We are so far behind. Because in India, the problem is not just that the market undervalues the pay, but that even the government undervalues the care workers. So we are running public health and nutrition systems on the back of local women who are not even treated as proper workers. They're called voluntary and volunteers, and they're paid an honorarium, which is often like 1/3 or 1/4 of the minimum wage. And the reason they can get away with this is because of the whole idea that there's all this unpaid work that the women do. Even the government is using this to run their public health and nutrition systems, which is shocking. And which perpetuates that wage gap that I mentioned.
I mean, this is all, I was just about to say, you know, it feeds into the inequality, breeding the gap with gender inequality as well. I mean, where do you see the major dislocations happening if this is allowed to continue in a country, say, like India?
Well, first of all, it massively perpetuates gender divides, okay? And it makes them much harder to actually even get markets to value what women do. It forces women into the worst kinds of fragile and low-paid kinds of occupations. Often the fact that they have to do so much unpaid work, we have a very low paid work participation rate, now as low as 18%, because so many women are doing unpaid work at home, fetching water, fetching fuel wood, in addition to all of the other care activities that everybody knows about. And so if you don't recognize this, you're not even going to do something to reduce all that.
Okay.
Quite apart from the welfare benefits and the social effects of better equality, you're losing out as an economy. We could have so much more economic growth if women could go out for paid work. We could have a better educated, more healthy population if we provided more care activities with proper trained workers with proper wages. We would have a better, more sound economy all through if we actually recognized this huge significance of care and rewarded it properly.
What is the Indian government doing in terms of the role of the state in the Indian economy, especially in its efforts to deal with this inequality, to deal with poverty eradication? I mean, it's a wide topic, but I'd like to get your sense very quickly of the role of the state in this.
So mostly this government is actually adding to the problem by, as I said, relying on these underpaid workers whom they don't even call workers without any workers' rights, by not providing proper care services, by not even enabling the conditions for women to actually reduce their unpaid labor. There are some small schemes which could be of benefit. There is a scheme to provide piped gas or cylinder gas to households so they don't have to go looking for fuel wood. But it's too small relative to the need and relative to the massive amounts of time that women actually do spend. Overall, I would say that this is really a government that it's not just patriarchal in its own self, it relies on patriarchy to undertake a whole bunch of policies which assume the existence of all this unpaid household labor that they can take for granted.
All right, we're going to come back and continue this conversation in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to Astro AWANI.